Hello, hello. This is Raleigh Mills, and welcome to another episode of From Cup to Coffee. The title of this episode today is Being Around the World, Single Estate Coffee of Honduras. And today we have a very special guest, the cupping farmer. Juan, welcome, and thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you very much for letting me be here with you. It's actually an honor to be on your podcast.
Well, thanks. So, as always, we'll start with what we're drinking today. I am having a delicious double shot of espresso of a Ethiopian natural processed bean from Hand Pitchers Coffee. It's actually a little company in Greece, in Europe. So, really acidic. I love those acidic coffees. But what about you, Juan? What are you drinking today?
Well, now you're making me feel bad. I love Ethiopian naturals, but for today, I had to be drinking my own coffee, right? So I'm drinking my house blend is actually called the house blend, which we have, which is it has natural in it. It's a mixed blend. It has natural in it, and it has washed coffee. That's what we use for espresso machines at our coffee shops. So yeah, I'm drinking the Welch's house blend.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess it's that's kind of a self-explanatory answer right there. But anyway, Juan, tell us a little bit, about yourself, where you're from. How did you get involved also in coffee and farming?
So basically, I was born in it. So I am a third generation coffee farmer in Honduras, right? I live in Western Honduras, pretty close to the Guatemalan border, actually. We're just 10 kilometers away from Guatemala. My town is a Maya town. It's like one of the first Maya towns, one of the biggest Maya towns in the Mayan world. And I live there, right? And my farm is 30 kilometers from here. And I'm a third generation coffee farmer. So that means my grandfather started our farm back in 1956. And since then, we've been coffee farmers. So I was basically born into the coffee world. And but then my father and uncle took over more or less. Both of them being one is civil engineering, the other one studied business. My grandfather was a teacher, and then along came me, which I did study agricultural engineering. So again, I'm the first well farmer that studied farming, but not the first farmer because my uncle and my dad and my grandfather are all farmers as well, right? And yes, so I I took over not over. I still have to answer to my uncle and dad, but I basically took over the operations of the farm um, recently in 2018, right after I came from because I also have a master's in crop nutrition. So right after I came from Germany, where I studied in the University of Hohenheim, I came back to Honduras and just started taking over the operations of the entire farm. That's in a nutshell who I am.
Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. That's so interesting. I mean, not only are you as you said, a third generation coffee farmer, but also, the education that you got, like crop nutrition. That's such an interest. You've heard people, oh, I studied English or I studied, history, but crop nutrition, I think that's a first for me. But that's so cool. Awesome. Well, I guess kind of just off the bat, so you're a single estate farming a company, right? So for those that don't know what single estate means, can you give a small little explanation for that?
Yes. So, uh, well, for starters, in the entire world, we're millions of coffee farmers, right?
Hmm.
It's millions and millions of coffee farmers between Africa, Latin America, and Asia, basically. Um, Now, a single state, which means I'm a single origin, single state coffee farmer. Single origin, it means I'm from Honduras, right?
Hmm.
Like the origin of my coffee is Honduran. But aside of that, I'm also a Western Honduran coffee origin, right? So it's coming even deeper into the origin. And then I'm a single estate farm, which means that I own um, more or less a mid-size to large farm, and all the coffee that we produce comes directly from us. Like my coffee, like from seed to our like our motto kind of thing
Hmm.
is from seed to cup, right? Because we do everything. We're vertically integrated in the entire business, from planting our plants to harvesting to processing, the wet mill, the dry mill, the exporting, and also roasting, and just selling our coffee in coffee shops and in supermarkets.
Wow,
So it's like
that's
we do everything in the coffee business kind of thing.
absolutely. Sounds like you all take a very, holistic approach too. So, I mean, I think that's fascinating. The fact that, you've read, oh, well, this is, a single origin coffee. This is from this country. But the fact that you can have, let's say here in Kentucky, you can have a cup of coffee and grind these beans and say, I don't only know what country these beans are from, I know the exact farm that that's from. I think that's pretty amazing.
And in our case, I could probably tell you, and I know who the pickers from those beans were.
That's insane. That is
Because
insane.
I have to be honest, right? You know, we were briefly discussing before we started this that how farmers are not as known in the coffee world, but the ones that are even less known, and to my opinion, as a coffee farmer, deserve even sometimes a bigger award than we farmers are the pickers. They're the true heroes
Absolutely.
of this business.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah,
that's right. They're the very first hand, really, when you think about it, that touches that,
the
that
cherries.
coffee. Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So I do know most of, like, I know all of my pickers, and I know that this batch probably was picked by Mr. Mincho and Ms. Gloria, something like that.
Awesome. It sounds like you have a good connection too with, it's not a, you're not a, big company just out to make a buck, right? It sounds like you have great
No.
relationships with everybody too,
That's
and I think that's very important. And I feel like that's what
definitely.
coffee should be, right? It's not about going out in the world and making, I want to make as much money as I can. I think coffee and in the coffee world, it's people who really enjoy coffee, enjoy what they do.
I agree, and that's how why I love like this kind of like podcast stuff, and being in a good relationship with my pickers and the people that work around their farm and everything. That's because I've always like one thing I like to like kind of promote or say, or like my personal belief, so to say, right? That you know how coffee is like the second largest commodity in the world, right?
Yeah.
But let's make coffee less of a commodity and more of a community kind of thing.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
so so like connecting people from around the globe, right? Like talking to you in Kentucky, I'm in Honduras, then again relationship with my pickers, relationship with clients that we have in Taiwan, that like we talk through WhatsApp. I send them pictures. Like that's a community, right? And coffee should be less of a commodity and more of a community.
Well, I'm not going to steal that, but that's a great saying, right? I completely agree, and I love that thought process.
Yeah.
But so, I guess the very first question I have for you, and maybe the most obvious question, is what is your favorite thing about your job? What, besides obviously the fact that, you get your hands in, the source of coffee, and you get to wake up every day and work in this coffee world. But what's your favorite thing about what you do?
So I have to go back to when I was small, I guess. You know how when you're a kid, you're usually like, at least here in Honduras, or Latin America, you're basically like into soccer, or like you're super into like sports. When I was a kid, I was watching Discovery Channel and National Geographic before I was even watching cartoons, right? So I always loved like the nature stuff, the exploring kind of thing. Like I always wished, like I saw those American movies with the Boy Scouts and everything. Dude, I really would love to be in a Boy Scouts kind of thing, right? But so nowadays, being a coffee farmer, what I love about my job is since I was small, I've loved nature and I've loved plants and animals, right? So getting the chance to like, I have I have my lab with me, my Labrador Retriever. He jumps into my truck. We go to the farm, and then we spend the entire day just in nature, like through plants and coffee plants, and through like even we also have cattle, so with cows, just like that connection to nature. That's what I love about my job, because I couldn't have studied something to be in an office 24/7. That I would probably go nuts like in a second. Mm.
I don't blame you on that one.
So
That
yeah,
sounds. I mean, hey, if you were on the Discovery Channel, I sure would watch your story. That's for sure. But that sounds. I mean, that's so right. That's almost a quality of life that I think a lot of people in the world don't get exposed
definitely.
to. I
I
mean,
agree.
in the United States here, if you said, yeah, well, I work, every day in nature outside. I have my dog, my truck, really getting my hands in the dirt. People would be like, well, what crazy job do you do? I mean, in here it's you go to work at 9, you leave at 5, and you come home. I mean, um, being outside is such an integral part, I think, of our nature and what we want to be, and
I
that's
agree.
fantastic. Now, here comes the opposite end of that question. What do you think is the most challenging aspect of your job? And I know you wake up at the crack of dawn too, but
Well, sometimes that is a difficulty. Even though we farmers do wake up every morning very early, sometimes like, damn, just 5 more minutes, please. But and I bet this is true for all farmers, cow farmers, grape farmers, any type of farmer. Right? But aside of that, sometimes like I love working with people, but sometimes working with a lot of people can be a little bit difficult because every head is a world, right? And that's why I love plants because I know what they want every single day. Right? So a challenging part of my job is having to work with or having to lead actually 50 to 70 people a day, kind of thing. That's challenging. The human factor of people leading is very challenging. I still I like it, and I love being around people and just spending my days like working with my community, right? But it is challenging. I have to admit it is challenging. And again, that's why I love plants.
yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, really, in a sense, you're a giant team leader, right? I mean, think of it same thing as maybe a big corporation where you're a manager and you have all these people working in an office under you. It's a similar thing, but I would say more complicated. A lot more things to juggle and balance there. At the end of the day, if something's going on with the farm or the coffee beans, you can't just say, oh, it's 5 o'clock. We'll handle it tomorrow and just leave it alone, right? That's
Exactly. No, we have
uh,
a saying as farmers, or at
mhm,
least here, we have like a time to punch in
mhm,
to our work, but we never have a time to punch
to
out.
punch it out.
Yeah.
Always on the clock. Nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that. Um, so I'm familiar a little bit with Honduras beans for maybe a little bit of a vanilla taste profile. But maybe in terms of flavor, what do you think is your favorite thing about the beans that you produce? I love Ethiopia because they're super acidic. I know Honduras are a little bit more balanced, at least they tend to be. But what do you think is your favorite thing about your beans and about those tastes?
Well, you did say right now it's that balance the Honduran coffee can have, because we do have good acidity, but we have a very well round body and very chocolatey. Our coffee is also known to be very chocolatey. So it's it's a very big mouth feel, and it's a very complex, like well rounded coffee. I don't know if I make myself clear with
No,
that.
absolutely, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So and that's usually what I do is if someone who is knows nothing about coffee wants to start getting into coffee, Honduras is one of the top beans that I'll recommend to them. That's more of I think it's a little bit more mild. It has that well-rounded flavor profile. It won't be, let's say, as aggressive as an African bean where you may get
Right.
that intense acidity. Absolutely. So when you're, as we know, we have many different fermentation processes
Mhm.
with those beans. And I think, we mentioned that in our first episode, and a lot of people actually came back and said that, I got so many texts and emails saying I never knew coffee beans were fermented. I knew wine, wine grapes were, but and that's insane. But what for you, you mentioned that you like natural Ethiopians a lot. What's your favorite, um, I guess, process? And also, do you do any anaerobic processing too? Because that's something a little bit less common known in the U.S., but they use that as a very big labor, anaerobically processed.
Hmm. So yes, at my farm, like sometimes I'm more of like a mad scientist kind of thing. I like to try everything. Like right now, I already got my hands on koji fungi. So I'll be trying this coming harvest. I'll be trying koji fermentation, right? Which is used to do sake in Japan, right?
Right.
So
Okay. Yeah.
and it's a process of fermentation as well, right? So yeah, most of our beverages now, if you really look at the processed beverages such as tea, um, wine, beer, alcohols, those are fermented, right? I think maybe tea might not be fermented. I'm not really familiar with tea, but a lot of the beverages we drink are fermented, and coffee is one of them. Like even washed coffee, it's fermented, right? And like you said, a lot of people don't know that, right? But we do a lot of natural fermentation. Like part of our one of our blends for our coffee shops is our house blend, which has natural coffee in it, right? And like I said, I'm more of a mad scientist sometimes, so I do try millions of different things. This year, I did try a 10-day long anaerobic fermentation. I did 5 experiments. 2 of them went to like
No.
hell. No,
Yeah.
something that happened. But I mean, it's the process of science. Like, it's trial and error,
Of
right?
course.
It's trial and error. Everything's trial and error. And then I had this like 10-day anaerobic fermentation. And one thing I learned, because when I was going back a little bit, when I was in Germany, I did take a lot of wine, whiskey, beer,
Hmm.
and schnapps classes, right? Like sensoric and like the process of them. So I'm trying to pick up what I learned about this. Probably most of them are alcoholic beverages,
Hmm.
and bring the fermentation processes into coffee, right?
Yeah.
So I did this 10-day anaerobic fermentation. First thing I did, like no, and like the people around me were like, "You're gonna try that with your mouth, like just like the juice." Like, yeah, if it's good, it shouldn't be bad,
Should be fine.
right?
Yeah.
It should be bad. It probably is a little bit acidic and a little bit like it tastes from like fermentation,
Hmm.
but should be okay to the taste. First thing I did was that it was good, and then those beans were amazing. I only had like maybe 10 to 15 pounds of that coffee. And funny thing is, my dad and uncle never really approved on that. Sometimes they might be like they're older, like the older generation, so there might not be as open sometimes. But they are when they see the results, and they were like, "Dude, what are you doing there? It's 10 days. Come on, mm-mm. That's not going to be good." And then out came the coffee after the drying and everything, and it's an amazing coffee. It has honey, it has peach, it has mango in it, papaya. It's a crazy coffee. So yes, we do a lot of processing and a lot of different trial and error of things. But honeys and naturals is a thing we do like on a regular basis. Now this anaerobic fermentations. Now that my experiments work, we're probably looking at doing a little on
A
a
little
bigger
bit.
scale.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to. I'll have to order some and try some when that's on a big scale. That man,
Yeah.
peach and papaya. And I always find that so fascinating. Is that when you think what does coffee taste like, and you ask somebody, at least here in the U.S., they'll probably say coffee or burnt, right? Burnt toast.
Uh-huh.
Um, but getting introduced in this world of coffee and starting to learn about having our sensory wheel up on the wall, and you know Like the funniest story, and I always say this, is like one of the most interesting beans that I ever tasted. Right from the we were doing cupping, right from the start, I said lemon. This is lemon. I've never been so sure about anything in my entire life. On the nose, on the taste, I was like, "Yep, lemon all the way." I was the only one who got lemon. Everyone looked at me
Yeah,
like I was crazy.
I heard your first episode. I heard the story, and what was his name again? I'm sorry, I forgot his
Harry's,
name. Harry. So
Harry's. Yeah.
Harris is right. Our tasting, like it's also so influenced by our eating culture, right?
Hmm.
Because one time I had a natural we did, right, and I was trying it, and there was this one flavor I couldn't figure out at all. I just literally couldn't figure it out. And then we had one, well, it was a potential client that came to us, right? And then he started cupping it, and he's like, black olives. Like,
Black
she,
all.
you're right, black olives. But I'm not really used to, like, I have black olives on my pizza from time to time, right?
Yeah, but you're not right. You're not
But
identifying and isolating that flavor.
exactly. But when he said black olives, it's like, boom, of course.
Hmm.
How could have not thought of that, right? But again, it's because he probably, I think he was Italian. So, right? They do have olives there. We don't have
Right,
olives here.
right. It's so funny. It's like your brain is missing that one piece. It's like I know
Exactly.
this is a taste, but I cannot put exactly what it is. It's a training when you think about it. You have to
It
train
is. It is.
your taste
Mhm.
profile, your brain to identify those things.
And
But that's
maybe something can be, I don't know. I guess something could be peach on my side, but could be slightly different on your side. I don't know.
absolutely.
Let's say that's similar to peach. Uh,
I was like apricot, apricot maybe.
yeah, but the same thing. I chose the wrong fruit.
The difficult.
But let's say something is, a, I don't know, red apple to me, but it's yellow apple to you, right? Kind of
Yeah,
thing. Like it might be slightly different, but because you're probably eating or more exposed, like Harry said, you're more exposed to yellow apples than I am more exposed to green to red apples, and therefore that's why we have those slightly different uh, approaches to taste,
yeah,
I guess.
yeah. At the
Hmm.
end of the day, I mean, it's really you're identifying. Okay, this is kind of going into my chemical engineering thing, but your body is identifying chemical compounds, and
Correct.
where is it recognizing and familiar with those chemical compounds in the foods, and that's why it's a little bit different for everybody.
Hmm.
I always think that's so fascinating, but I also love that you can have a cup of coffee or a bean here, and then on the other side of the world, someone can have the same thing, and you can have similar experiences, right? And you can talk
Yes.
about it. It's not a
Yes.
difficult thing. It's not like you have to all,
Hmm.
hey, you make a cup of coffee with this bean and you get to discuss. And I think that's such a fun part about the coffee world.
Exactly.
Um, so I have, as someone who is very passionate about water quality and filtration, is there anything special? Tell me about the water that you use to water the coffee trees. Is it just, your run of the mill water that you get from a faucet? Is there anything that you do or anything that you want to keep in mind about water as you go on?
So, like the water we use to water our plants, that's God given. That's rain, right? But aside of that, what we do use in our processes, so like wash coffee and everything, one thing that I think it's one of our plus things, kind of thing, is that we have 4 different springs of water in our farm. So it's yeah. So we take care of 80 manzanas. That would be like 120 acres of forest. We have 120 acres of forest inside of our farm, but just because we have those four water springs in the farm, so our water comes directly from those springs. The water we use on everything in the farm, right? And every process, the water that you take a shower in our farm, it all comes from those springs, right? So it's super fresh, super natural mountain water, and that's why I think it also helps with coffee because it's also not. it's rich in minerals, right? It's rich in everything. So that's why I think our coffee, to a point, is also good and special, because we have those like directly springs coming out of our farm. So our waters are not slightly polluted along the way because we got them from two
Somewhere,
or
yeah.
3 miles away, right?
Hmm. That's so cool that you said four different springs on your.
Yes.
So if you, let's say, use that water, different water from different water sources, for processing your beans, does that affect the taste of the bean? Do you know, or do you kind of just take
I
from
know
which?
I know that it does affect, because I had a friend of mine. I don't remember who it was, but I remember the anecdote, so to say, right?
Hmm.
Um, they said they were having troubles with uh, with the taste of their coffee. It had a little bit or more, sometimes, or a lot of the times, it had a lot of phenols in it, right? Which is like a medicine taste in coffee, right? And they couldn't figure out what it was. They were doing the drying mill correct. They were doing the wet mill correct. They were doing everything correct. Along came somebody. I'm not sure who it was. Right. Along came somebody, and he started to kind of investigate around, and he saw that they used a water to process everything directly from a river that crossed through their farm, right? But he took samples of those river, and that river was slightly contaminated, right? So it was the water, the dirty water, so to say, that gave them those phenol tastes in their coffee, and and until they changed the water they used, their coffee got better. So imagine, like, sometimes coffee will be soaked in water for 8 hours, 12 hours, right? If your water is polluted or slightly polluted, right, it's gonna get soaked into the bean, and therefore that's why it is important, right? What water you use in your processes, and you have to have clean water in order to process your coffee.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I always kind of had in the back of my mind. I mean, of course, my work deals with, polluted water and how to clean it. We're seeing this emerging worldwide problem that there are less and less unpolluted sources of water. And I've thought about that for, the vegetables that we eat or the fruit or, I mean, coffee, right? How hard is it going to be in 10, 20, 30 years to be able to obtain clean water to produce a good, high quality coffee bean without these phenol off tastes? Now, when you're saying phenol, you're talking my language for sure. But how to get those beans. I think that I could definitely see that as being a real challenge in the future. With a
I
lot of things,
agree.
but
I just read, like, again, like I said, I'm a total science nerd. I have a collection of National Geographics, of course, right? And I was reading, I think somewhere in, like, in Nat Geo or something, that apparently, right, it no rain in the world is any more 100% safe to drink, so to say. Like, you could drink water. I mean, you can drink water from the rain, but what the article said, that, like, every single drop of rain nowadays has one or two pollu- pollutants in there, right? And like you said, in 50, 60 years from now, it's going to be challenging.
hmm
It will be.
Well, we hope that that's a problem that we can work towards, as scientists, farmers,
I
I mean
agree.
everyone across the world. That's going to be a problem that we're going to have to face together. And if any community is going to fix it, I'm sure coffee will be right up there in the front. Um, so I guess another interesting question and thought that I had, because when we're importing coffee and looking at coffee, they say, harvested between, July and August, or harvested, there's different harvest seasons, so to speak, for coffee. You don't harvest them all at the same time. And I was wondering, how does your job change with the seasons? In the middle of the summer, how different is your job from, let's say, December or January?
So for us here in Honduras, and in Western Honduras, and in the mountain range of my farm, right? Because even in Honduras, you'll have slightly different harvest season. Harvest seasons officially start in Honduras, I think, in October. But mine doesn't really start until December. Mm. because I am higher in altitude, and depending on where you are and everything, right? But my season starts, well, it could start in November probably. Let's say end of November, and it reaches all the way to probably the very first week and a half of March, right? That time, it's 4 a.m. to 1 a.m. kind of days, like literally, like basically no sleep, no nothing, right? It's like
Rush hour,
super,
yeah,
like we're on steroids during that time. Now, in off season, so to say, right, after harvest, it's kind of more relaxed.
yeah. Mhm.
Why? Because right after the coffee harvest, what we do is we clean the farm, right? We give our plants a little bit of a boost of nitrogen because they've been depleted a lot. Like it's like having a baby.
Yeah.
They had babies, right? So they need a supplement there, right? So we give them a little supplement, and then we de-weed. In March is already the beginning of the dry season. Well, February is the beginning of the dry season in Honduras because we don't really have seasons here. We have rainy season and we have a dry season, right? So in February, it's already more or less dry season. So we'll de-weed the plant, right? And we're gonna start doing like during off season. I go to the farm between 6:30 and sometimes even 8, right? Because there's no rush anymore. The work at the farm will start at 7, right? But we're gonna be fixing the roads. We're gonna be fixing the shades of our plants. We're gonna be de-weeding our plants, and then we do 3 different fertilizations during the year, right? And usually that starts in May with the rains. That's when rains start again in Honduras. We do 3 different fertilizations between May and September. So we do one in May, or end of May. Just this week, we finished our second fertilization, and our third fertilization is going to be in September. In between, we do some pest controls kind of thing. I did a video not so long ago in my Instagram talking about it because it is a very controversial
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
But like I said in my video, if you're sick, you go to a doctor and you take medicine, right? Because
Right.
you do need something because your body is not being. I mean, imagine you have pneumonia, right? And just drinking, I don't know, peppermint tea or chamomile tea won't make you better, right?
Yeah.
So we do give our plants medicine, so to say, right? During that time. But it's like a week of work, and we do basically nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Then probably the next week, we're going to be doing another de-weed kind of thing, and so on and so on. So it's a very it's a very relaxed time between March and October.
Okay.
More or less, right? Now, that's in farming, but then I do have the processing plant, like the roasting and everything. So that never stops. That never stops. For me, at least, that never stops, right? But it is off season for farmers, and usually farmers tend to do one or other things. During this time, I also focus a lot on my cattle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you mentioned those. Okay.
Because we do have them, and it's actually, it works in hand because right after harvest is when we start our insemination processes for our cows because it's the time to start. I focus a lot on my cows during that time.
Yeah. So I like the idea of that too, that it's not just, okay, we do coffee 24/7. This, I mean, it's a farm, right? You get this holistic experience. You have your cattle, you have your crops, and it's all about, the cycle of the seasons and what Mother Nature gives you, right? That's how you have to go through it. I do want to ask though, you mentioned the altitude and the harvest season. So on your single estate, your coffee farm, how does altitude come into play? And that's something that we're always trying to wrap our head around. A high altitude and a low altitude in the exact same region will have a very different coffee. So how does altitude kind of play a role?
In simple words, so to say, to put it a little bit simple, coffee is a bean, right? It's a seed, and a seed that needs nutrients. A seed is an embryo, right? For life. Seed is like literally the embryo for life. It's a yolk kind of thing, right? So what does the plant need? It needs a source of nutrients, right? In order, like the seed is the very first thing a plant where the plant takes its nutrients from, right? So at different altitudes, to put it a little bit simple, right? Coffee has, well, and you're a chemical engineer, so coffee is basically chains of sugar, right? The coffee inside, it's chains of sugar, right? The higher you go in altitude, the longer those chains of sugar will be. Therefore, it'll have more flavors, more aroma, more everything. The lower in altitude they are, those sugar chains will not develop as good. So they're going to be very short, and therefore they're not going to be as tasty. Now, if you go above, like, I don't know, like 24,000 meters above sea level, then again, those coffee chains will start to be shorter. And why? Because they're too high in altitude, right?
So there's
They don't.
there's a sweet range of
There's a
altitude.
street range. Okay? Usually, people say it's between 1,000 and 2,200 meters above sea level, give or take. That's like your sweet spot. I would say the best, like the sweet spot inside of the sweet spot, is between I'd say 1,600 and 2,000.
Okay.
I would say that's like the best part, in my
Part.
opinion, right? Now our farm is not that high, sadly. I wish I had like those car jacks
Yeah, just
just to make the mountain be higher. Our farm start at 1,000 meters, and our highest altitude is 1,350 meters above sea level.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So,
I have no idea in feet what that
oh,
is.
that's okay. We can work in meters. I'm definitely okay with that. So, for the most part, when you hear of, this single estate coffee bean was grown at a high altitude, etc., natural process, that high altitude typically is something good. That's a good connotation for what
Correct.
we're trying to. Okay.
Correct.
Interesting.
Correct.
Now, this I did
And
mention.
sorry,
Oh, sorry. No, absolutely.
and high altitude, you start to count, like you start to say coffee, like you have HG, SAG, you
Hmm.
know that? So HG means high grown, right?
Oh, okay.
SAG means strictly high grown, right? So you'll have HGs will start at 1,000 meters. So it's already considered to be high grown at 1,000 meters. Because Robustas, for example, which is a different family, right? It's like tigers and lions. They're both cats, but they're different cats, right? So Robusta is the lion, and Arabica is the tiger, right? Kind of thing. So Robustas do grow at very low altitudes. Robustas, I am not sure because we don't have Robustas, but I think Robustas you can grow them like from 300 meters to 1,000 meters.
Okay.
Right? That's why they might not be as tasty as well.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, that is the best explanation of Robusta versus Arabica that I've ever heard before. I'll definitely gonna use that. Um, Thanks. Yeah, that's so interesting because when you think of a farm, at least here where we are in the surrounding area, there's maybe mountains far away, but for the most part, it's a lot of flat land. People take into account the fertilizer, the nutrients you put in the soil, the water, and the sunlight. But I think altitude is something that just adds a whole different dimension to it.
Yeah,
I think
Kentucky's
that's
in the Corn Belt, right?
yes.
That's
Yeah,
flat.
we like our corn. You go up to there's even more corn. It's pretty crazy. Yeah, if you ever go to maybe Illinois, it's just no. I'm sorry if anyone's listening is from Illinois. It is corn as far as the eye can see. That's what it is. It's amazing. Like the second you get into it, you're like, whoa. Um, but
Cool.
I have one more question, and I kind of mentioned it with Hari's, and we talked about it a little bit. Previous to this podcast is, the coffee farmers are kind of the under represented, under known people of this coffee process. And we talk about, at a wine vineyard. Everyone loves going to a wine vineyard. It's a very appealing thing to do, as, whether it's a day trip or a vacation trip, Napa Valley. That's a very, very appealing vacation, but what is, is there coffee tourism in your area? And, what do you think? What would you say to someone who is, on the fence about visiting, let's say, a coffee farm in your country, in Honduras?
So on offense, I would say Cafe Welches, which is our Finca San Isabel Cafe
Hmm.
Welches, right? We do have a coffee tour. So come to us.
Perfect. There we go. Problem solved.
Come to us.
Problem solved.
Copan Ruinas, Honduras. It's a place where you can find a coffee farm with a coffee tour. But yes, you're right, and I did hear that on your episode with Harris, right? It's true. When I was living in Germany, I did go to a couple of like vineyards to see how the ice wine was done, right? And in I think it was in France, I also visited a farm, and I went wine harvest, like grape harvesting, right? It was a thing you could do, right? So it's true, and that's why my family thought, hey, we should do that same thing with coffee, right? Why not, right? So we do have a very like what's it called? A very established tour in our farm. Like we take you with a trolley, with a tractor, right, up the farm to the like the mid part of the farm, and then you walk around 3 kilometers downhill. You go through the coffee plantation, and you go through the forest, and you go through a place where we have like this beautiful flowers and medicinal plants that we use, like the natives used to use here for as medicine, right? And then you walk inside of the forest. There's a restaurant where you'll eat typical Honduran food, right? Finca food, we call it, right? Finca is the farm in Spanish. So it's finca food. You'll eat Honduran finca food. And then you go down, and then you go into the dry mill, and then we'll take you through the dry. You go through the wet mill, and then we'll take you through the dry mill. We'll explain everything there. You go into the roastery. You'll see how coffee is roasted, and then if you want, you can with like a tasting, not a cupping session because, but like a
Yeah.
tasting of different coffees in our lab, in a
Hmm.
tasting lab, and that's a tour we have, and it's just $35.
So you said $35?
Yeah,
Oh my gosh! Wow, that's
with food and transport included to the farm.
okay. That's insane. That's absolutely crazy. So it's not necessarily like it's gonna be, if you go. I mean, what the most expensive part maybe will be the plane ticket or the travel there, depending on where you're coming from. But I mean, I would expect that to be so much more expensive. Now, that's 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 very interesting that you all have that established, tourism process because a lot of coffee farms that I've spoken to so far, that's not really, something that they have. It's kind of like almost like a program, right? They have
Mm-hmm.
a down pat and maybe, an experience where they'll come and kind of just, see around the farm or they can walk around. But is that something common in Honduras, would you say, that they're starting to establish becoming more common, possibly like a tourism aspect of coffee farms?
I think right when the pandemic hit, we farmers had to innovate, right? And I think a lot, like everyone, because a lot of people were just jobless, and we were all at our houses. Even us farmers, we my town went crazy, and they like blocked every single thing. We were just allowed as farmers to go out between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. And it takes an hour to get to my farm because there were military posts. And so, long story short, we had like 4 hours of work at our farm, and we had to come back, right? So a lot of people did think, and I think in Honduras we already have like 3 or 4 different farms that do this coffee tourism, right? So it's not only us. I have to give credit because, if you're here, you don't need to come to my farm. Preferably, do come to my farm, right? But hey, if you're in Costa Rica, Cafe Brito also has a tour. I think in Guatemala, I know like a couple of people that have tours there as well. Uh, but it is a thing you can do, and it's interesting because, like you said, it's like on a regular farm, you'll just like look at plants and that's it. Like if you don't really understand plants or science or coffee farming and everything, it's just gonna be plants. Like whenever you come to my hometown and here in Copan Ruinas, we have this beautiful Mayan ruins right next to us, right? Like pyramids and everything. But if you walked in without a guide, it's just a bunch of rocks.
Yep. Yep. It's
It's
all
literally
about, yeah.
just a bunch of rocks.
It's all about the education, right? What you know.
Exactly. So you do need like that guidance, and we have a guide along the tour that will explain everything, right? So that different like approach to coffee tourism is interesting because you learn a lot. And that's
Mhm.
what we get as feedback. It's like, dude, your tour was amazing because I literally did not know that a coffee cherry was red. I thought coffee was brown,
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? and during harvest season, if you come during between December and February, it's even better because you get to see the harvest process. You'll get to see, you could probably get to harvest a little bit of coffee yourself, right? Like I did in Germany, harvesting grapes,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
So yeah, it's cool because you can do that, and it's cool because we have it, and you can come to us.
Absolutely. No, I'm
And
you've convinced me.
actually, I'm doing a little bit of propaganda, I guess you know what's it called. But I'm thinking because my Instagram has picked up a little bit, right?
Mhm.
And I'm thinking, and this is the first time I'll say it in public, so to say. I'm thinking on doing like origin trips. I'm thinking
Oh, yeah.
of kind of contacting a tourism agency here in Honduras. That you probably could come to Honduras, tour included, like come to our farm and everything, come to different coffee shops in Honduras, and get to see the Mayan ruins. And we have the second largest barrier reef in the world, so you get to swim in beautiful Caribbean beaches.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So it's like an origin trip kind of thing. I'm trying to like put it all together. Like I don't have
Of course.
yet, but I'll probably do that in the coming months.
Yeah, I absolutely love that idea. I mean, and the thing I always say is I would love to see this becoming more of a established experience, visiting coffee. I mean, what you just described, and if you describe that to your average person here, at least in the United States, I think they'd see that as, the trip of a lifetime. I mean, being able to see ruins, swim in a beautiful ocean, seeing where your coffee beans come from, and not only just walking it, but learning, really
Mm-hmm.
understanding and touching, that experience is just unique. I mean, that's something and that's what you're doing, right? You're taking these steps towards establishing something a little bit more permanent, a little bit more accessible to
Correct.
others, and that's amazing. I mean, congrats to you. I think you're doing exactly what in my mind. Last week I was like, man, I wish somebody would start doing this. There we go.
Well, yeah.
Well, awesome, Juan.
I'm
Thank you.
figuring it out. When I have it figured out, I'll let you know.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'll be there. You don't have to worry about that. That sounds amazing. But I know we're running towards the end of our podcast episode today, and I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you again so much for being on. I hope everyone listening learned a lot. I know I sure did, and I thought I knew quite a bit. But thank you so much, Juan, and thank you everybody for listening. Yeah, we enjoyed it.
Well, thank you really for inviting me, for having me here. Again, like I said, it is an honor to be here. Like I love this. Again, coffee should be more of a community, less than a commodity, right? So I love this.
That's the great ending note to go on. And if you haven't already, check out the Cupping Farmer on Instagram. I think it's probably one of the best coffee Instagram social media accounts that I've found so far. And that's how I found
Thank
Juan.
you.
I mean, yeah. So
Thank you.
thank you all so much for listening and have a blessed day.